Thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. And I kept score on the singing of the two national anthems, and the Turkish side clearly wins in terms of volume. Congratulations. To all our members and guests, I extend a warm welcome and my special thanks for joining us for the 33rd Annual Conference on U.S.-Turkey Relations. This is my first annual conference, and I'm truly delighted to be experiencing it with you in this fine hotel. I appreciate, and I hope you do as well, how unique this opportunity is, not only to enjoy each other's company, but also to celebrate the enduring qualities and the surpassing importance of the U.S.-Turkey relationship. I know that many of you are committing significant amounts of time and personal resources to be with us this week, and I want to thank you for that. I am fully confident that your participation in this conference will be fully rewarded, just as it has been for thousands of Turkish people and Americans before you in the more than 3 decades of the history of this conference. Each year, well ahead of the conference itself, we agree on a conference theme. This year, the theme is a critical partnership for a changing world, and each word in that theme has meaning. In partnership, it all begins, in my view, with the reaffirmation often delivered as a throwaway line, but one which deserves to be said with feeling at this annual conference, is that we are friends, we are allies, and we are partners. We are partners in national security through NATO, partners in foreign policy that bears directly on Turkey and its region, and commercial partners in joint ventures and trade and investment that provide jobs and profits and vastly better living conditions for Americans and Turks alike. The word critical. Another throwaway adjective that deserves our further thought. Turkey and the United States are indeed critical one to the other because of where we are and what we stand for, the economic welfare, the national security, the individual freedoms, and democratic right of one has a critical bearing on the other. Changing world. The 21st century has announced itself as the century where change happens at a very rapid pace. Governments struggle to keep up with the speed of global events and with the very definition of what constitutes international security changing before our eyes. No longer is it just about our militaries alone. It now includes things such as cybersecurity, economic security, and energy security, just to name a few categories. So we will certainly try to focus your attention these next 2 days on the opportunities that emerge from change and our special relationship. But this conference will not just simply slide glibly by the dangers that also come with change and are better dealt with as partners. I'm not going to recap today all that's occurred in our countries or in our bilateral relationship in the years since this conference last convened. There's too much happening and at too fast a pace. But I would like to underline several that are certain to affect how we will relate with each other in the future. One is Cyprus. Years ago, an American working on the Cyprus issue remarked, quote, "You'll never risk the mortgage if you bet against settlement," unquote. But this year, we have reason for fresh hope. When Vice President Biden arrived on the island 2 weeks ago, and noted that he was the most senior U.S. official to visit in more than 50 years, he said, and I quote, "I've traveled to Cyprus today because I believe this time it can be different," unquote. Whether it will be different depends on the leaders of the people of the two communities, but Vice President Biden left no doubt that a serious process of settlement will have the energetic help and support of the United States. Imagine what a difference that would make in Turkey's situation in Europe and with the European Union. Turkey is bearing an increasingly heavy burden for the pain and suffering that Bashar al-Assad is inflicting on the Syrian people. Upwards of 900,000 refugees, including 250,000 in camps across the border, increased political and social tensions, cross-border bombings, and bloodshed. Our coordination and cooperation on Syria has been far from ideal or perfect, but we have little choice, however, to strive harder and work better. I can think of no outcome in Syria that would be acceptable to one and opposed by the other. For the first time in a generation, Turkey appears to have a genuine opportunity to resolve the Kurdish issue, and in more than 3 decades of internal violence and bloodshed. I'm very optimistic that this time it can be made to work, and if it does succeed, it will mean a dramatic difference in the social, political, and economic lives of all Turkish people. While this is quintessentially a Turkish issue, I think it's important and valuable that the United States publicly and repeatedly state its support for this risky but very courageous political effort. The ceasefire that is now held for well over a year can surely create a new normal for all Turks, well worth protecting and preserving. The same must be said for the resumption of Turkey-Israeli diplomatic relations. I'm convinced that Turkey has a hugely valuable role to play in support of a broader Middle East peace. Economically, we must count both our countries among the fortunate. While our growth over the last year was not all that we would have wished, it was in both cases positive and certainly far better than many of our European and global partners. Our economic health and promotion of even greater bilateral trade and investment were addressed last month when Ministers Babacan and Zaibechi met here in Washington with Commerce Secretary Pritzker and U.S. Trade Representative Mike Froman in the context of the framework for strategic economic and commercial cooperation. It falls to us now to execute, for while governments can create the environments within which business can thrive, it is up to the private sector to see that it is done. Turkey, I know, remains apprehensive for the transatlantic trade and investment partnership negotiations with the EU, and wants from the United States a commitment to negotiate a parallel free trade agreement. We talked about this just a few days ago with President Gül in Boston. We will hear today from U.S. Trade Representative Mike Froman on this issue later this morning. The American-Turkish Council understands Turkey's concerns and commits to support for a bilateral free trade agreement. This is, however, a government-to-government issue, and until the two governments see eye to eye on the matter, the ATC will monitor with care developments in the U.S.-EU trade negotiations to assure that Turkey-U.S. trade and investments are not harmed in the process. And the ATC is prepared to engage in another valuable way. A partnership between the ATC and the Howard Baker Forum will launch this fall an initiative on Turkish trade and investment, a public policy initiative aimed at building support in Washington for a revitalization of U.S.-Turkey trade and investment framework. This initiative will examine the impact of TTIP on the U.S.-Turkey relationship, identify potential options to move the relationship forward, and issue forward-thinking and practical recommendations to policymakers. Shortly, with the Howard Baker Forum, we will be inviting you to join us in this endeavor to reinvigorate U.S.-Turkey economic partnership and to expand opportunities for the transatlantic trade and investment. So this 33rd annual conference, as with previous conferences, is an opportunity for us to keep pace, to take the measure of change in both our nations, and to assess what we can do as organizations and individuals to make the future that we're building a brighter one for ourselves and for our generations to come. Later this morning, a distinguished panel will discuss our political landscape, and I'm confident that that panel will treat the details of these other changes with the understanding and balance and critical judgment they deserve. Shortly, we will hear from Mr. John Faraci, CEO of International Paper, about their substantial and additional investments in Turkey and what fills him with commercial optimism for the future. We'll have a couple of sessions that focus on TTIP and a session in the banking and finance sector that draws attention to the benefits that are being drawn from the new partnership between NASDAQ and Borsa Istanbul. I'm excited that U.S. Trade Representative Mike Froman will join us at lunch today for a conversation on bilateral trade and investment in his brief from the FSECC talks held here in Washington last month. We'll have a session, as Jim Holmes mentioned, on geostrategic developments on energy, and a fellow Marine, General John Paxton, the Assistant Commandant, will speak to us this evening at the annual conference dinner. Tomorrow, the Golden Horn Breakfast will feature Senator Roy Blunt, who's a member of the Senate Appropriations, Commerce, and Armed Services Committees. We'll hear from both of our distinguished ambassadors in Washington and Ankara and have 2 sessions on agribusiness, 2 sessions on infrastructure, including presentations on infrastructure opportunities in third world countries. Of course, throughout both days, those of you interested in Defense and Security Affairs Corps will find interesting sessions on security policy, defense cooperation, and defense procurement. I'm delighted that both the Turkish General Staff Chief for Plans and Principles, General Erdogan, and the new Undersecretary for National Defense and SSM Chief, Dr. Ismail Demir, will be with us for those sessions. So you can see that we have a very packed, very full agenda. I am confident that at every session you will hear the best and freshest thoughts and find a tight focus on a relationship that I am firmly convinced is among the most important in the world, and that's the Turkish-U.S. relationship. I'm delighted you've chosen to be with us for the full experience. So once again, on behalf of the Board of Directors of ATC and our corporate members, welcome. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our conference co-chairman and chairman of the Turkish-American Business Council, Mr. Haluk Dinçer. This is Haluk's 6th conference as TAKE chairman, and he is well known to most of you. Holder of a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Michigan, Haluk joined Sabancı Group in 1995. 12 years ago, Haluk became Food Group president, and a decade ago, the president and chairman of Sabancı Holdings Food and Retail Group. I met Haluk for the first time yesterday, and I've already been impressed by his leadership, his instincts for business, his personal kindness, and his commitment to the Turkish-American relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Mr. Haluk Dinçer.